Hello, School Transportation Nation. It's Tony Corpin. We're here at the podcast once again. Every week, we are here for you talking school transportation, hot topics, news. And man, there has been a lot going on in the news cycle this week. Ryan Gray is going to bring us up to speed on all the latest info. Ryan, welcome, sir.
Thank you, Tony. Welcome, nation. Always great to be with you.
Beautiful. Hey, guess what, guys? This episode is brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software, and by School Radio, your source for reliable radio communications. We have a couple of guests we are talking with as well. Sean Hollas, Transportation Director for Goddard Public Schools in Kansas, and a 2025 Top Transportation Teams Award winner, brought to you by TransFinder. So thanks, guys, for that. As well as Brenda Boyd, the Transportation Director for Holland Public Schools in Michigan. This month's cover subject on the STN September issue. So excited to speak with her as well. So great couple of interviews lined up, Ryan.
Yes, absolutely. I speak with Sean here in a little bit, and he's a former military, U.S. Army platoon sergeant, motor sergeant. So I had that transportation background, apropos for, as we're recording this, on 9/11 Remembrance and Service Day. So thanked him for his service. Thank all of you out there for your service. It's hard to believe. Remember that day like it was yesterday, and I know so many of us do. So a lot of celebrations, or not celebrations.
Yeah, just a remembrance. I know what you're saying, Ryan. And it's one of those things that is in the fabric of America, right? It was one of those situations that really elevated, what does security look like? What does terrorism look like? What does community look like? And, almost like patriotism as well. I think it galvanized the country to come together to find unity in a tragedy. Right. And we've seen tragedies happen, school shootings. Obviously, there was a school shooting last week in Colorado. We had seen a notable political figure, Charlie Kirk, was shot and killed. I mean, the headlines were like, there's a lot of violence, and it was very concerning to see what was going on. And I think when you look back at 9/11, it impacted so many lives, but it changed the way transportation, at least air transportation, was viewed, and security. And there was still remnants of that. I mean, only recently the TSA said you can leave your shoes on again, right? These are all things that are with us. And I think when you look at school transportation, we're always concerned, right? Could there be some terrorist incident where a bus gets hijacked or taken over? You've seen some things happen like that. Nothing like students killed on a bus through an explosion or something. I mean, that, God forbid, like, just, you never would hope for anything like that. But it's, how do we prepare as an industry and stay vigilant? And we talked about it last week as well, because there was a shooting the previous week. So there's been a rash of violence lately in our schools that we've seen. It hasn't necessarily trickled over to transportation, but the bus is definitely the way kids are coming and going from school. So it's just making sure the behaviors are strange. The driver sees something, says something, right? It's one of those situations, Ryan.
Absolutely. And in terms of the kids you mentioned on the bus, those conversations, the children are having those conversations. Absolutely. During the ride, are the school bus drivers, or if there's monitors on board, are they trained to be able to deal with those types of instances? We have, for TSD conference, we have a school counselor and mental health expert who will be talking about mental health first aid. And of course, with TSD conference, is going to be geared more towards students with disabilities on school buses. But in general, for staff, for other children that are riding the school buses, they're watching the news in this day and age of YouTube. If they're anything like my kids, I think every kid across America has a phone or a tablet within reach, and they know how to swipe coming out of the womb. And just to keep them off those devices, that extremely difficult. My wife and I deal with that all the time with our two children, and especially our youngest, our 4-year-old. And he's finding our phones and finding the tablets, and he trying to minimize that stuff.
I think he calls me as well. I get pocket dialed. I'm like, Ryan, I missed your call. You're like, oh, nope, that wasn't me. It was my son calling you. I'm like, oh, okay.
Exactly. So, certainly in this day and age, it's different from when we were all brought up. So it's just, as you said, it's that vigilance, it's that awareness, not only for see something, say something, but pay attention to your children in your care. What's the conversation? Are you noticing some things might be out of whack with some of them? Or you deal with these children and you see them every day. A lot of times 2-3 times a day. Is something different, whether that be something that might allude to they might be thinking of doing something, or they might just be having problems and rightfully so processing all of this stuff that they're seeing out there. So definitely it's a difficult job, but an honorable job, and just keep fighting the good fight, as I tell Sean Hollas a little bit later. It's just transportation. We need to be able to be grounded and safe, and it's so important to be able to be that unifying bond for the children, because a lot of times we talk about this all the time. It could be the first adult that child sees. Certainly the first adult that represents the school district. Keep them safe and keep them sane.
Speaking of saying things, we had a couple of listeners reach out to us last week, I guess, on our episode. You had mentioned having the biggest stick, and that really got translated wrong or sounded wrong on the podcast, and people took umbrage to that. And it was a bit of a word play where people heard something, and even the transcript for Spotify translated it a certain way. So maybe to clear the air, we apologize for that for myself. And I know Ryan never intended it to sound that way, but clearly, some people heard it that way.
Yes, STICK is what I said. So when we're talking, and this is not scripted, so we don't have control, or we're actually looking into it, seeing how we can get Spotify to fix the transcript. But I know that on Apple Podcasts, it's correct. So it's just one of those things. Yeah, in a podcast, we're not live, but it just gives us a reminder to make sure that if something comes across as out of bounds, to go ahead and address that.
So you'll have to go back and listen to last episode to find that. So go to the last episode, go listen to it, see if you can find that Easter egg in there. And you can give Ryan a bad time about it, guys. He loves your emails.
I love him.
Ryan at stnonline.com. Make sure and send it his way. That, it'll be a sign of love, Ryan, that the readers, listeners, they're all tuned into the podcast. So fun. The minutia is great. I love that people are listening so closely to every word that you're saying. So you got to give us some good headlines this week, because, everybody's keeping an eye on you, keeping you honest, Ryan.
Sure. I'm sure. Well, Microbird opened up its new manufacturing plant in the U.S. in Plattsburgh, New York last week. So I know we had announced that, or had written an article about that last fall. They had announced that in last
ribbon cutting, right? More of a ribbon cutting. I know the plan was already running.
Yeah, it was ribbon cutting. It's the grand opening,
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, the buses aren't, I'm sure buses are probably, if not already starting to be worked on, they're going to be coming off the line pretty soon.
Oh no, I was told that they've already come off the line. They're already producing. So they've already had, and one of the quickest turnarounds from taking a plant over, because it used to be Nova Bus.
Yep.
That had that plant, and they obviously exited, and Microbird came in and saved the day because they had a very skilled workforce that was already in the region, and they were able to take advantage of that and keep those people working. And it's obviously got so much attention that Governor Kathy Hochul from New York showed up and talked a lot about the impact to New York workforce. I think they started with, what was it, around 220, and they're ramping to 350 plant workers.
225,
Okay.
yeah. They're employed now, and they're planning to grow to 350. So 156,000 square foot facility, so pretty big facility up there. Like you said, it was Nova Bus, a quick turnaround. Like you said, I think it was like 10 months or something. So it was an existing plant, but they obviously, a lot of work has to be done to retool that and get that up to spec for these new buses to roll off the Type A's. But certainly, I think what jumped out to me with Governor Kathy Hochul there, certainly the jobs, but New York has this electric mandate staring in front of them. And certainly, we know now that with Microbird, they have their new generation electric school bus, longer range. We'll have to see what that means to the state. A lot of folks are still trying to wrap their heads around that in New York. We reported earlier this year, of course, that there is an extension available, an additional extension of another year. So if school districts can prove their hardship, which a lot of them are telling us that they're not going to be able to meet the mandate by basically next year, 2027, to start purchasing electric school buses. So all new purchases will have to be electric school buses, but they'll get a reprieve of a couple years as everyone looks at this 2035 date when the fleets are supposed to be completely electric. 50,000 school buses in the state. There's only several hundred, I believe, so far in the state. So they've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and just to kind of, for the audience that isn't as familiar with Microbird, right? That's a joint venture between the Girardin family up in Montreal and Bluebird Corporation, who's obviously down in Fort Valley, Georgia, Macon area. So that partnership has been around for a long time. And I saw John Weiskell. I was watching the press conference, and John talked a lot about how Canada is one of our absolute strongest trading partners, and how Microbird and Bluebird have this deep partnership, and they're very excited about this new plant, this new U.S. manufacturing facility for Microbird. And to keep in mind, Montreal and in Drummondville, which is where Microbird's headquarters are in Canada, it is a 2-hour drive or less to Plattsburgh. So this clearly made a lot of sense for them, because they can go very quickly in between the two operations pretty seamlessly, and probably share equipment. I'm not sure what a cross-border looks like. I know that they've got some benefits as being an essential business, so they're not really impacted by tariffs from U.S. to Canada perspective, at least for now. That seems to be an ongoing kind of deliberation on how the wind blows with tariffs. But for now, that seems to be a good thing. And I think with their solidifying their manufacturing in the United States, that's got to also bode well, because I know it was called Microbird USA, which only could mean that they've incorporated a U.S. company in the States, which gives them some strategic advantages as well. So good on the Girardin family. Steve Girardin has been a great friend of STN for a very long time. So we congratulate him and his family on this great addition to their business as Microbird continues to grow in the school transportation market. So Ryan, I know we had a few other headlines that popped up you wanted to hit on. You want to touch on those? So we did have fentanyl is perhaps going to be added to the CDL drug panel. So we know the fentanyl crisis in America, the opioid crisis, is reached epidemic proportions. So the U.S. Department of Transportation on September 2nd actually issued that NPRM, the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking. So folks can find that story on stnonline.com. I got some comments there from a drug test consultant, actually Tonica Lathrop from Senate Consulting, which we've used out at STN Expo West in Reno. They're based in Reno, so might have her on the agenda this coming summer. But certainly, and we know NSTA is looking at this, and obviously, looking to voice their support of that. There's some other technical
considerations in this NPRM, aligning it with basically the U.S. Health and Human Services, which creates the federally mandated guidebook, basically for proper administering of these drug tests for employers. So a lot of kind of that wrangling of just getting everything lined up, but folks have till October 17th to comment. So the public comments are open. You can find that link at stnonline.com.
Yeah, I know some other headlines that caught my eye, Ryan. I know there was a pretty horrific bus fire up in Montreal with a Lion electric vehicle. I know it was operated by First Student. The news reports out of Canada had said that it was not electrical. It did nothing to do with the battery. It was another system. I guess we'll wait and see. Obviously, Lion has definitely a lot of headlines lately being going defunct, being sold off, new company coming in to save them, but only supporting manufacturing in Canada, specifically in Quebec. So we'll see how that ends up shaking out, but obviously we're catching our breath. The pictures online are pretty crazy. There's some aerial shots of the bus on fire, the burned out vehicle. No one was injured, thank God, but definitely bus fires, something to keep an eye on as part of it. I surmised that, maybe another system had failed and caused this. I know that there was a report that the driver had disengaged was it the heating system or the cooling system and something.
Smoke started coming out of the vents. So something with the HVAC.
Yeah, that may have caused it.
And what impressed me was that this huge fire, I mean, you see the pictures and the plume of black smoke that's just, rising hundreds and hundreds of feet in the air. That's right next to a high-rise building. the smoke, black, thick, but that the battery system would remain uncompromised. And, you talk about fires, there's more diesel fires of school buses across the North America, certainly across the U.S. every day than there have been electric fires so far. Now, of course, we only have so many. When you have 1% of the school buses or less than 1% of the school buses out there are electric, obviously it's a numbers game at that point. But certainly that was something that was impressive, that it didn't spread. And that's what we've been hearing from a lot of the electric school bus manufacturers, the battery folks, that this stuff is basically compartmentalized. So if you have something that's happening within the battery, within the pack, yes, that's where these problems can arise. But if it's not, it really, these things are really safeguarded. So that was good to see. You mentioned Lion, and the headlines that they've been making. Obviously, you never want to see your bus burning on the news, but I think the fact that the battery system did not go up with it is a win for them, and they need a win. The PR battle that they're still battling here in the U.S. with the voided warranties. So as part of that sale to this real estate group in Quebec, was it voided any U.S. service warranties? So I know a lot of folks are still trying to deal with that. Will remain to be seen what happens with that. But certainly, it's good that we did not have a big, huge electric school bus explosion, and even better, like you mentioned, no one was hurt.
Yeah, nobody wants that. That's bad for the industry. That's bad for PR. So glad it was contained and the firefighters took that blaze down, and I'm sure they'll supply more information as it's readily available on what happened. But and I'm sure First Student is the largest fleet in the country, in North America. So I'm sure they'll put their best people on it to determine what was the outcome of that. So more to come. But I know in terms of the specifications, Ryan, and keeping buses safe, we had the NCST specifications and procedures book from the 17th National Congress on School Transportation come out. It's now available for download and ordering. We got an email on it last week, and you guys can go to stnonline.com, click on the link there if you'd like to order a copy for your yourself and read a little story about kind of what happened there, and more on that. But definitely electric buses, alternative student transportation. There are quite a few new topics that have emerged over the last 10 years since this book was redone. Was it longer than 10 years? I feel like it's been an eternity.
Well, it was 2020 was when it was supposed to be updated. Of course, it was canceled. So yes, 10 years that really everyone was operating under the national specifications and procedures from 2015.
Long overdue for an update on that.
Exactly. And that's when NCST moved to Iowa, Des Moines for the first time. They had to cancel because of COVID. And then Des Moines was the location this past May. In NASDIPS, which supervises and oversees NCST, they're changing that. So you can also, they make comment with that release of the national specifications that this coming spring, 2026, there will be more information about the 18th NCST dates and locations. So stay tuned.
All right, before we get to our interviews, we got a quick message. Hey, safety is a number one priority for everyone in school transportation, and even more so when needing to communicate in a school bus setting. School radios, push to talk over cellular or POC radios, are the safety enhancement you need to provide clear communication across all aspects of your fleet. Schools, SROs, that's school resource officers, and beyond. School radio helps take safety and connectivity a step further by offering interoperability solutions that bridge conventional two-way radios with POC systems, creating a unified network that boosts effectiveness and safety. This integrated strategy guarantees smooth communication in both emergency situations and daily activities. To learn more about how school radio can improve safety in your communication methods, visit school-radio.com. That's school-radio.com. All right, Ryan, take it away.
All right, Nation, welcome back. We are pleased to be joined here on the School Transportation Nation podcast stage by Sean Hollas, the Interim Director of Transportation for Goddard Public Schools, USD 255 in Goddard, Kansas, just west of Wichita. Sean, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me.
So, Sean, you are on the podcast because you and really Goddard Public Schools, the transportation department, is one of this year's top transportation teams sponsored by TransFinder. You were honored out at STN Expo West in Reno, Nevada in July. Saw you up on stage talking about all the great things that Goddard Public Schools is doing. So congratulations again to you and your team there. How many transportation folks do you have there in Goddard?
Just over 100. I think I'm at 107 right now. That includes activity drivers and people that are kind of part-time here and there.
Okay, so just over the cusp of the 100. So the top teams are split into two, over 100 employees, under 100 employees. So tell us a little bit about Goddard. As I mentioned, just west of Wichita. You are the interim director, and I'll get into some of that with you here in a bit. But describe Goddard to our listeners briefly.
Sure. Goddard's a very small town, and it's mostly communities that people work and live in Wichita. It's, like I said, it's a small town itself, and it's just been growing. I came here in 1997, and our enrollment for the district was probably about 2,300 students, if I remember right. And last year our official count was 6,600. So it just continues to grow as they take farmland basically and make housing developments. Wichita just keeps kind of creeping outward. And our school district in the beginning, like I said, it contained all these rural areas, but they keep making housing developments in them.
And what was interesting to me about your background, so you've been there as the interim director for just over a year. And in that time, quite a shift has happened. Obviously, you were tapped to be interim director for a reason, and we can get into that here in a minute. But first of all, your background, and it's very appropriate here as we're recording this on 9/11 Remembrance and Service Day. You were a platoon sergeant, actually, in the U.S. Army. and you actually worked in transportation. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Sure. So I enlisted in the Army right out of high school, and I was a diesel mechanic, primarily worked on Humvees, a little bit larger things. And I was at Fort Riley, Kansas. I was at Fort Lewis, Washington. And then they selected me to be an Army recruiter after that. And that's how I got to Kansas. I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So when my time in the Army was done, or when my time in recruiting was done, it coincided with the end of my contract. And I got out of the Army and decided I was going to go to college and get a teaching degree.
Well, thank you for your service, sir. Appreciate it. And then you did get a teaching degree, and I saw you've been a technology teacher. You were actually a principal for over 11 years at two different high schools. So you went back, you said you got your secondary teaching degree. So how did this transition happen to transportation?
So yeah, I was a teacher. I was an assistant principal. I was a principal. In 2024, I decided, I was eligible for retirement, and it was just time. It was time for me to retire. And I knew I would do something else. I didn't know what. I used to joke around with people and say, I'm going to go and work at Starbucks because number one, you get free coffee. And number two, I wouldn't be in charge of anybody. I used to joke about I didn't want to be in charge of my retirement job or even have an email that I had to answer. And it's just funny, I felt called back to my transportation background as I looked at jobs, in the transportation industry. And my superintendent, Dr. Henry, approached me and asked me if I'd be interested in moving to our transportation department as the interim director. And, at first I was like, no, I don't know anything about school buses, routing, how it works over there. I don't know anything about that. And we had a director who she was just more interested in being the assistant. She had been the assistant before, had out of necessity become the director, and really was more comfortable in that role as assistant. And he said, everything's in place to do what we need to do. The people that route and that do discipline and do training and order fuel and maintain the buses and all that stuff was in place. They were having a hard time with the driver shortage. And he said, I think with a combination of you knowing the schools, the leadership that you got, in the Army and in the school district, plus your recruiting background, you might be able to get out there and recruit drivers. And, I'll be honest with you, Army recruiting is the reason I left the Army. It was very high pressure, and it was hard, very, very hard. And so I thought, oh my gosh, I don't want to do something like that. But as I thought about it, I love the district. I've been here 20 some years. And, the clincher was when I went to my superintendent and I said, if I did this, what would your expectations be of me? And he said, really, I don't even know. I don't know if it can be fixed. He was looking at the potential of outsourcing and hiring a company, that would take over our transportation department, and thought that was something he was going to investigate. And he said, I don't know, give it a try and see. You might not be able to fix it. And that kind of took the pressure off. And so I said, okay, I'll do it. And long story short, found a lot of drivers, made things a lot better here. And I really like it more than I ever thought I would have.
That is, and obviously here you are, a top team winner. And again, that program sponsored by TransFinder, it's based on a survey. And so teams basically, nominate themselves or say, hey, this is why we feel we should be nominated. And the questions ask about leadership, career development opportunities, resources and incentives. So when you were going to take the interim job, and we mentioned that there's this really bad, it was a really bad driver shortage, right? And your superintendent was looking to outsource. What was the culture and morale when you stepped into those shoes?
Overall, I think it was a lot of good people that were just kind of worn down. They had been combining bus routes or running double routes because there weren't enough drivers. And, whenever you have a department this big, there were people in here that just had a negative culture and that were kind of culture killers. So the first thing I wanted to do was to try to make it better. And, house cleaning comes along with that, I think. And people have a choice. They can either, they can change what they're doing and get with the program, or, they're going to have to find another place to work one way or the other. And we started off by just making it physically a better place by painting the break room and making it a more cheerful place, and, getting some different furniture that was a little more comfortable, and retooling the break room with new microwave ovens and new coffee pots, because the stuff was kind of old and some of it was a little broken down, giving the place a good cleaning. And I think when you have something like that, people automatically feel like, okay, people care about us. They feel valued. You're going to feel better about your situation. And then, just other things, getting involved with the people, getting to know them, having personal relationships, I think goes a long way, to again, building that culture so that the good people don't want to leave. And then what I found too as a strong recruiting tool was referrals. Bus drivers a lot of times know other drivers in other districts or in other fields. And a lot of the people I hired last year, their friends said, hey, come over here. This is a good place to work.
What's the driver situation today? As you guys started school, how many weeks ago?
We're in week 5. We started August 11th.
Okay.
So right now things are great. I hired, and this includes paras and van drivers too, but 61 people last school year, and or from the summer and the school year, and I've hired about 10 or 15 this year. That we've added, I think, 13 or 14 new bus routes, and it's really helped. The buses are less crowded. We don't have to pick up as early. We don't have to drop off as early. And we used to do bus routes for our secondary kids. We have intermediate schools, middle schools, and high schools. And the middles and high schools are together next to each other, but the intermediate schools are several miles away. And when a bus picks up all three, there's a wait involved and traffic. And so a lot of the new routes, we made them intermediate only, and then middle and high school only. And again, it helped with the timing. It made it so that principals weren't watching kids after school for 15 minutes until the bus could get there. And, that helped a lot. There's a lot of turnover. It's just, I've learned that it's a field where people come and go, and, not because they get fired or anything. There's just been a lot of turnover. So we're probably up since June of 24, about 25 people. So we've hired a lot, but we've also had a lot leave.
Gotcha. And so with those new routes, it sounds like for the most part, you have everything covered.
Mm-hmm.
From a technology standpoint, you had mentioned those new routes. Was this existing? We were building on existing routing, or how did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, they had taken out bus routes over the last probably 7 to 10 years. And so we just started reinstituting those routes. And along the way, we upgraded from Route Finder Pro to Route Finder Plus. We implemented Wayfinder, which is a tablet system, in about 20 of our buses, and Stop Finder, which is a parent app. It helps a lot with communication and letting the parents know exactly where the buses are, so they can anticipate and the kids don't have to wait in the rain or wait in the cold, in the mornings.
Of course, those are TransFinder products. And I would imagine, with the app, one of the things, and we've been tracking this for many years now, that's got to be a culture saver right there. If your team doesn't have to dedicate half their day to fielding parent phone calls. Where's the bus?
Right.
Why is the bus late? This complaint or this comment, over and over again. Right.
Yeah, it helps a lot. And it's also got a built-in messaging feature. So, parents will email us, Sean's not needing a ride today. And a lot of times it doesn't matter if it's a stop with 7 or 8 kids, we're going to stop anyway. But, country routes or single stops, it helps. Then we just let the driver know, hey, you don't even have to worry about this student today, and, save them a little bit of their trip.
And you can push that right probably to the tablet. Does this have real-time or turn-by-turn directions and the messaging where they can get those, and then they can know they can just keep moving?
Right. Not messaging. We don't do that. The directions, yes, they can take attendance on the tablets. We use radios and call it out if, that's still the best way. I don't want drivers to look at messages, text messages, or anything like that while they're driving.
Sure. What other technology is Goddard? Either have you implemented recently, or are you looking to implement?
We are just in the middle of implementing Service Finder, which is a product our mechanics use. It'll help us with inventory and service schedules and automate work orders. We were still using a paper work order system, which, it's a little archaic and it's easy for the stuff to get wrinkled, damaged, lost, whatever. And I think that'll help us just be more organized and maybe a little more efficient.
And you have that fleet background, so that obviously you can come in and you can provide your perspective on that. So I'm wondering, now that you've been in this interim chair for a year, a little over a year, personally, how's that transition been? I mean, obviously you had that fleet background, you were in the classroom, you were in the administration building. Did you work with transportation at all as a principal?
Not a whole lot. If kids had disciplinary issues, then the way we do things here is we have 2 discipline coordinators that take care of the big discipline issues. And so if there was, say, for an example, a bus suspension, they would come over and visit at the school, and I would usually sit in. But otherwise, the people because you work in district and you see them at functions and stuff. But I really didn't have a big understanding of how things worked. I knew my last year as a principal, it was really, really bad. There were many days when I would have to keep kids after school for about 30 minutes in the gym. And, it was just because there weren't enough drivers. So drivers would come and pick up their regular route, take the kids home, and then come back and pick up a different route. And, between doing that once or twice a week and having sometimes bus routes were combined. So they would take 3 routes and spread them across 2 buses. I knew that it was really bad. And, I would go out there and talk to the drivers after school when they were waiting for pickup and stuff. And you can kind of tell that the stress level was high. So, walking in, that was another thing I thought, like, can I even make a difference? But like I said, fortunately, we were able to hire a bunch of people and it goes, I think I should say too, like I've got an incredibly supportive administration here. When I come to them with what I think might be crazy ideas, like putting out yard signs all around the surrounding area with a QR code that says, come drive for us and advertises our pay and free training and paid training. My superintendent was like, do it, And so, things like that, or having a barbecue to build morale and paying for the meat and things like that. They've been just very supportive in everything that we've tried to do. And I think it's paid, dividends.
Obviously. So with the award, what's been the biggest eye opener for you going over to transportation?
I don't have a CDL, and I've never had one, and I may or may not get one. It's tempting, but for right now, I think my place is in the office being the leader. But, I drove big equipment in the Army, and so I kind of thought, I could probably drive a bus, but everything that goes into it, driving a bus, being safe, driving on roads that may not even have a shoulder, and at the same time having 45 or 50 kids, that may be doing stuff or being loud and distracting you and stuff, and cars that don't yield to stop signs or lights. And it's just, I guess I've got a newfound respect for how hard it is to operate a school bus safely and get the kids to school, which, I probably took for granted,
I think most people do until again you're in that seat. Sean, really appreciate you coming on, sharing about Goddard. Things really seem to have turned around. So congratulations to you and your team. A lot of hard work being put out there every day in Goddard, Kansas. Thanks again.
You bet.
All right, that was a great interview, Ryan. Thank you to Sean as well. Going to hand it over to Taylor Ekbatani and Brenda Boyd.
Hello, nation. It is Taylor Ekbatani. I am joined on the podcast with Brenda Boyd. She is the transportation director for Holland Public Schools in Michigan. So welcome, Brenda. Thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Hi.
And I love having cover stars on the podcast. So your face graced our September issue, and now I get to look at you in person and we can kind of chat. So we can dive into that conversation. But if you guys haven't checked out the September issue, it's out. Brenda is on it. She shares a lot of great information. So definitely check it out.
Thank you.
So, Brenda, before we dive into, the specifics and technology and looking at, back to school for you, I want to give the listeners a little flavor into who you are, how you got started in transportation. I saw that you joined Holland Public Schools in 2021. So what kind of led you to where you are now?
I just have always been in transportation, not just at Holland, but always had a love for technology. I just always have been fascinated with the routing software, just knowing what it can do and the data that it can collect. I'm just excited about it.
So you said you've always been in transportation. So how did you get started? How did you start as a school bus driver?
No, I actually started at a place that went out of business. And so back in the when I was in my 30s, wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. So I saw a sign on a school bus that said, now hiring bus drivers. I didn't quite know where I was going to go in my life. So it just kind of led me into walking into the transportation department and just one thing after another, and worked my way up to working in the office and just started working in the routing industry. I started working in routing way 20 years ago, way back when routing was first new, and just picked it up and just had a knack for it.
So did you route before the routing technology, right? I've heard stories about maps on a wall and push pins.
No, I was new when Versatrans came out way back, like Versatrans 1. It was called RP back then.
Gotcha. Okay.
The very first Versatrans came out.
Okay, so what brought you to Holland then?
Just different changes in my life, small changes in my life.
Okay, so you've been there since 2021, and I know one of your big focuses was routing technology.
Yep.
So what did that process look like? Did the district have any sort of routing technology to begin with?
They did, but not to the point that I wanted to see Holland go. I knew that the tablets were out there. I knew that the data collection was so important here in Holland. What started this whole process here is the parents have the reserve a ride. The thought process of the buses were so overloaded that the parents thought that they always had to reserve that ride. And it was just a whole web of, people there was just so many passengers on the buses that actually were not riding the buses. And it was just, I needed to know that data of actually who was riding. And the products out there helped me determine who was actually riding and who wasn't riding. The scan badges, the tablets, everything just all led together to help make those routes more efficient.
So you're saying it's not just about having the routing software, but all the pieces and components working together into kind of one system. So you guys have the RFID cards.
Yes, and the tablets.
And the tablets that you mentioned. And parent apps as well?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So what importance does that bring you? How does that kind of help with your job as director?
It makes the routing more efficient. It makes me available to do other things.
And we've kind of talked about it before, but good routing software starts with good data.
Yes.
So how are you guys ensuring that the data you're putting into the software is, good data?
It wasn't at first. It took at least a year or two to build up to good data. And it's still an ongoing process. I could say it's good data now, but then 6 months from now, it's not good data. So it's an always evolving process. I feel comfortable with it right now. A year ago, I didn't feel comfortable with it.
Okay. What did you do to kind of refine that data so that you could ensure that it was, good data essentially?
Work through the riders versus the non-riders.
Yeah, that sounds like it was a huge piece of the puzzle at Holland.
Yes, it was.
Okay. And so now you have this technology, couple years, I guess. When did you guys implement it?
22.
Okay.
In 22. Okay.
So a couple years. Gosh, we're already in 2025. So you've had a couple school starts with it, but how, was your school startup this year? Any, lessons learned?
It wasn't as the summer didn't seem as time consuming working those 14, 15-hour days working on the routes, making sure that the students were loaded. It seemed, for the first time in my whole career, it seemed like summer wasn't so working nonstop. I actually got to enjoy part of the summer.
It was a vacation like it should be, right?
I got to see daylight.
And you attribute that to, the technology?
Yes, the data collection.
Okay. So for school startup, when did you guys start?
We started August 27th.
Okay. So buses were rolling. So did you guys do a registration process for the riders?
We started the registration process at the end of this last school year. So that helped with enrolling those students at the beginning of the summer. So that helped all summer long to speed up the process of getting those students loaded.
Yeah. Okay. So first day of school was perfect then. It sounds like you.
I wouldn't say that, but it's ongoing.
Right. Okay. How many routes are you guys running?
We have 22. We have 22 right now.
Okay. And I know we were talking earlier before we started recording that you guys are in a little bit of a driver shortage.
Yes.
What does that kind of look like?
I have one sub. That's it. If someone calls in, we're short.
Gotcha. So how are you navigating that? Do you guys, office staff, have CDLs?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So filling in where you're needed.
Yep. So far, been lucky. Knock on wood.
Okay.
We're trying.
What are some, recruiting tactics that you guys are using?
Flyers, word of mouth. We do a referral bonus.
Okay.
Trying everything we can.
Yeah.
I know that there's shortages everywhere, though, and we compete against other districts.
Yeah, I was going to ask, so where is Holland located within the state of Michigan?
We're on the west side of the state by Lake Michigan.
Okay.
But we're right in the center of the city limits, and surrounding us are some really big school districts. So we're a smaller district, and the other districts around us, they have a larger fleet and a lot more drivers. So we're competing against a lot bigger districts. So it's easier for someone to go to a bigger district with more hours.
Gotcha. But there's got to be some advantages too at a smaller district. Talk yourself up for a second. What are some advantages of Holland?
I like that we have smaller routes, less stops. Mm-hmm. You have bigger districts, you have more stops. Like our bus routes are like 6 to 7 stops and you're done. So your bus is full with the 6 to 7 stops, which means that you can pick up extra work here or there. You can go to your sports trips or your extra activity quicker. You can pick up extra hours that way. Other districts, you're on your route maybe 2 hours, where our routes are only an hour.
Okay.
And they're city blocks. We're all city blocks.
So besides, routing software, have you guys looked into any other technology?
No, I just need to get through this first.
Has it been a long adoption?
It has been.
Okay. So how have you kind of worked through the drivers on getting them up to speed on the processes? It's
training. Mm-hmm. A lot of training them and convincing them the end result is better. Yeah, positive motivations.
So as you kind of look toward the rest of the school year, is there any goals or anything you have your eyes set on, something you want to achieve this school year?
I want to achieve a perfect school arrival time. Within the routing software itself, you can run reports of the arrival time and the bus depart time. And I would like to have those routes perfect, that they arrive and they depart within a 5 to 10 minute window. It's just a goal I have. I don't know if it's achievable. Just working with the drivers to get their routes fine-tuned to have that goal.
I think that's an awesome goal. And it helps you with your data, right? Because that seems like it's kind of the biggest thing for you guys, at least, or for you, something that you're focused on is good data.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. What about, are you guys looking at any alternative fuel?
No. Our district is so small and the routes are only an hour that it's kind of difficult to have those buses built into our budget.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think even, with the adoption of technology too, I think a lot of smaller school districts are maybe less eager to adopt the technology. So I think, you guys being a smaller school district and kind of talking of the benefits of routing software and RFID cards, I think that's important to share as well. So what kind of advice would you give maybe to a smaller district who's like, maybe we don't need that technology just yet?
Oh, the cost savings. The cost savings alone, you have pure data of your ridership. You have pure data of your mileage on your buses, the cost that it takes to run that bus, the end of the year cost of that bus that you have versus this year versus next year. You have that data that you can use year after year to see how much it costs for that bus year after year. Instead of replacing a bus that's newer, if you have a bus that's costing you more money, that's a bus that you're going to replace. Or if you have a route that's overloaded one year, based on the data, you're going to spread out that route next year. Or if you have a huge population that comes in one subdivision, you're going to look at that, take a step back and look at that and spread that route out a little bit. Everything's based on that data that you get that previous year. Mm-hmm. And for me, that all comes from those cards, the students coming in.
Has there ever been concern of, students losing their cards?
There has been. That's something we haven't figured that part out yet. Mm-hmm. We're just replacing cards and not charging our students.
Okay. So something, still to work through as you guys kind of continue to adopt the technology.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brenda, for jumping on the podcast. I appreciate it. And like I said, she is our September 2025 cover star. So if you guys haven't seen it, go check out the September issue. But lots of great nuggets in the September issue. I mean, we talk about security, we talk about ridership, we have our, technology super users like Brenda. So definitely go check it out. But thank you again, Brenda. Great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you.
A special thanks to Ryan, Taylor, Sean, and Brenda for joining the episode this week. It was chock full of great information. And you know what? We appreciate our sponsors, TransFinder and School Radio, for bringing this great podcast to you guys, our listeners. We're here every week. Make sure and thank our sponsors. Let them know you heard about them on the STN podcast and you appreciate their support of the podcast. We couldn't do it without them. Got to pay the bills too, guys. Visit STNonline.com for all the latest news and analysis on the school transportation industry. Don't forget that TSD conference early bird registration October 3rd is coming up so fast. Don't miss out. Save $100 with early bird registration. Go to tsdconference.com. That's November 6th through the 11th down in Dallas, Frisco, Texas. Guys, remember, subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to Pods Nation. We're here for you every week, breaking down the latest headlines and news and getting great interviews from around the industry in school transportation. Nation, we love you. We'll see you next week.